Hey everyone, welcome to the Mental Playbook with Christine Dalgety. We're here to chat about all things mental health, share some awesome stories, educate, and advocate to break stigmas and gain power through knowledge for all ages and walks of life, and give you the tools you need to boost your mental game. So grab a coffee, get comfy, tune in, get inspired, and let's dive into some fascinating conversations. Remember, your mind is super powerful, and with the right tools and knowledge, you can master your mental playbook. And while you're doing that, take care of you. Hey everyone, Christine here. Welcome to the Mental Playbook with Christine Dalgety. Today's episode, we're going to focus on workplace well-being. I think that workplace well-being often gets overlooked. We think of it as like a buzzword, mental health in the workplace, but there's so much more to it, and I want to dive into it a little bit. So if you are an employer, a manager, business owner, and an employee, I think that today's information is going to be really helpful. I'm going to touch upon why workplace well-being is important, some barriers to it, and ways that you can promote the mental health, mental well-being in your workplace. The question that I only have one question today, because the question that I have, I kind of did a deep dive into that too. And that's mostly based on, once I started looking at it, information that I've learned as a business owner, but also as a psychotherapist in helping people navigate being off on mental health leave and that sort of thing, and the different human rights, labor laws. And so I think that if you are an employer, stay till the end, because that question is going to answer a lot of questions that you may have and that are actually legal. It's an obligation, and if you don't do it properly, you can be written up for human rights violations. So as always, I'm going to start with some statistics, and all of these are from Stats Canada. And some of them are repetitive from my Busy Minds episode, because I did touch upon workplace stress and how it contributes to chronic stress. So some of these will be similar to that, but also when I start talking some dollars on how much the money Canada loses each year because of mental health issues and workplace issues, it's pretty staggering. So to start off, 21.2% of employed Canadians stated or they report high or very high levels of workplace stress. And the leading causes, not shocking, is heavy workloads and trying to balance that work-life balance. And women are more likely to report high stress than men, high work stress than men. And no shocker, healthcare and social assistance sectors report the highest level of stress, work-related stressors. Mental illness is the leading disability or leading cause of disability in Canada. 500,000 Canadians miss work each week due to mental health issues. And when you think of the population of Canada and the population of workers in Canada, 500,000 may not seem that much, but 500,000 people a week are missing work due to mental illness. And here's the big one. The economic burden of mental illness is $51 billion annually in Canada. And 6.3 billion is attributed to lost productivity. Those numbers are huge. So just one reason right there why we really need to focus on mental well-being in the workplace. 7.5% of workers took time off due to stress or mental health in the past year. So that averages about 2.4 days per person in Canada as a whole. So 2.4 days lost per person. So like I said, today we're going to talk about workplace well-being. We're going to talk about the barriers. I'm going to kind of break down barriers. I'm going to talk about some ways that I try to ensure my employees' mental health is forefront, and things that I do here as a business owner, I have a little bit of an advantage because I am a psychotherapist. When I started this business, I said to everyone, I'm a psychotherapist who happens to own a business. And now I'm a psychotherapist and I'm a business owner. I can manage both, and it's been a learning curve. And so I want to share some of how I do it here as well. People think that, workplace well-being, okay, we want everyone to be happy, right? We want everyone to do the job, but it's so much more than that. There's 3 different areas in why or how workplace well-being, mental health matters. Okay. And so I'm going to break them down: productivity, creativity, and overall health. So like a ripple effect that it has. So for all you employers out there, listen to this part specifically. I mean, I want you to listen to all of it, but productivity, because as a business owner, productivity, that's your bread and butter, right? That's how you make the money for the business. If you incorporate positive mental health programs, promote mental well-being in your business, in your office space, in whatever it may be, it causes a reduction in absenteeism, right? So mental health challenges, as I said, are a top cause of disability leave in the workforce. And I'd already said 500,000 Canadians miss work weekly due to mental health issues. If you promote mental health in your business, that's going to reduce that. And it's also going to reduce presenteeism. So what's presenteeism, you ask? Presenteeism is when people show up, but they're not really doing anything, right? They're just present. They're not productive. They're not really doing anything. And so even when they're at work, stress levels, people aren't motivated to work, right? Stressed employees underperform. They don't feel motivated. So healthy workforces promote motivation, focus, and output. And as an employer, that's what you want. And the other thing is the return in investment. So this is kind of cool. For every dollar that you put into mental health programs in your business, the return is approximately $1.62, right? In improved productivity and reduced cost. So sick leave and that kind of thing. So that's a really good thing to look at. That's a good number, right? 62 cents for every dollar that you put into it. And then I want to look at the creativity part. So I want to kind of look at the creativity as, this hidden superpower in psychological safety. When people feel safe, when they feel valued, appreciated, supported, they're more invested in what they're doing. They're more invested in their job. They're more apt to offer ideas, and their performance is going to be higher, better, whatever term you want to use. Chronic stress narrows thinking into this risk avoidance, right? Instead of exploration. So when we're experiencing chronic stress, we're just trying to avoid risk as much as possible because that's going to add more stress. So what we want is exploration. We want them to, their creativity to flow. We want them to have more ideas to contribute to the business. Mental well-being fosters people's ability to be more innovative, to explore more, like I said, more ways to add to the business. And burnout dulls curiosity, problem-solving skills, right? And when somebody's burnt out, they don't want to look into more things. They don't want to solve problems. They just want to go status quo or have somebody else solve the problems. And if you create a healthy team, that team becomes more adaptive and imaginative. So there's more teamwork involved. And then we want to look at the overall health, the ripple effect that this overall health of your business can have. Prolonged workplace stress is linked to heart disease, anxiety, depression, compromised immune or weakened immune function, which then not only are people going to be off for mental health medical leave, but then physical health medical leave as well. Lack of sleep and poor mental health have compounding effects, right? So, like I said, that's going to increase medical costs because then there's going to be physical and mental health leave happening. And outside of the workplace, it's people experience a lower life satisfaction if they're experiencing a lot of chronic stress. And we're at work a lot of the time. And if we're experiencing, that workplace stress, that is going to carry over into, quality of life satisfaction. If we can support well-being in our workplaces, it's imperative because it improves social connection, it improves resilience, it improves engagement with staff, both on and off the clock. I remember in one of the jobs that I had, earlier aspect of my career, actually towards the end of my career in education, I knew it was time I needed to follow this dream because for those of you who work in education, you get it. It's not an easy place to work all the time. And on Sunday nights, sometimes I would look at my schedule to see what day would be a good sick day because I was trying to find time. I wasn't into it. I loved working with the kids, but all of the politics and everything else that was going on, it wasn't really conducive to mental health and improved mental health. And so that was kind of my sign that I need to move on. If I'm trying to look on Sunday night, what day would be good to be sick? Often I couldn't find it too because I was so busy. And so then that just, it just kept other podcasts. I talk about that backpack. My backpack was pretty full by the time I left. When workplaces care for their people, then the people want to work. And that's something that I really try to incorporate in my practice. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about my own experiences later, but I want my employees to feel appreciated. I want them to know that I see them. I see the things they're doing. In turn, they want to do things to help my business. They want to come in on times that they may not be getting paid for, but if we have an open house or something like that, they are all hands on deck. And that is because they feel appreciated. So if you can foster that kind of environment, it's going to be more productive for your business as well. I want to talk about burnout, right? So burnout, stress, and toxic work environments. There is a term before I've talked about toxic positivity. There's also toxic productivity. Toxic productivity is when employers, business owners, managers, whatever it may be, focus on productivity only. Mental health, physical health, we need to get this product out. We need to make more money. And when that's the only focus, that leads to the burnout and stress. And I want to talk about how it impacts the employee and how it impacts the organization. So how does it impact the employees? Well, first of all, some of these are no-brainers, right? Like mental and physical health is going to decline. Chronic stress increases the risk of anxiety, depression, cardiovascular issues, weakened immunity, like I had said. So there's mental and physical, and they're not in isolation. They can compound. Burnout leads to emotional exhaustion, reduced self-efficacy, and a deep sense of detachment from your work. You don't feel like doing it anymore. You don't feel connected to it. It's, sometimes I have clients that say, I just kind of have the mindset now that I just need to get the job done so I can get a paycheck and pay my bills. That's going to lead to burnout because there's no joy in it. You're just more like a robot. Another impact that it's going to have on employees is a decrease in performance and motivation. Overwhelmed employees struggle to concentrate, they struggle to focus, they struggle to perform, they make more errors, they lose creative focus, they lose a creative drive. and they may disengage completely. I can't remember when it was because since COVID, since the pandemic, my timelines are mixed up, and I'll say, "Oh yeah, that was a year ago." No, it was 5. I think it was probably last yearish. I'm not sure, but the new buzzword was quiet quitting, and that is what I'm talking about here, where they just start to pull away, right? They don't quit their job, but they start to almost like a work to rule thing, right? Like they just pull away. They only do what is required and at minimum. So, they're just giving the minimum. And then some people like formally resign too. That's part of the employee impact that happens when we don't promote well-being. And then there's also strained relationships. So toxic work environments can put a strain on, colleague relationships. A toxic environment breeds fear. It breeds blame. It breeds distrust. It increases gossip. And then that puts that strain on not only work relationships, but also family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, because I don't know many people, if they're feeling that toxicity at work, just leave it at work. We often bring it home with us because it's just this heavy cloud over us. And emotional exhaustion can carry into an employee's personal life, and again, straining those family and friendships. It can also cause interpersonal conflicts. I know some clients who told me, and I'm not just talking about like in close relationships, but I have clients who told me that they're just so stressed out with toxicity at work that they went off on somebody in the grocery store, right? And then they felt horrible, but the person cut in front of them, and it was kind of the last straw. And some of my clients and others that I know, there's a social withdrawal that can happen too when you're in a toxic work environment. When you're home, you don't want to do anything. You don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to go out. A phrase I often hear is, yeah, it's after being at work all day and then trying to go, it's too people-y, right? It's too people-y. I'm just going to have to deal with people's crap is what I often hear. They withdraw. And then if we're going to look at impact on organizations, there's a high turnover. If you have a toxic work environment or mental well-being is not promoted on the work at the workplace, there's a high turnover. And then you drain talent, right? So burnout is a top reason why Canadians leave their jobs, especially among younger workers and caregivers. Those in the caregiving profession. And here's a stat that I also found. Replacing employees can be costly. It often exceeds 50 to 200% of an employee's salary, right? Because of, there's lost productivity. When you're trying to find somebody else, you may have to offer that person something when they're leaving. And then sometimes people want more money if they're coming in. It might be hard to find somebody. So more lost productivity because you develop a reputation of high turnover. And then there's lower productivity and innovation. So the impact of a toxic work environment, I keep saying toxic, which is absolutely, but even just a work environment where people don't feel mentally supported, right? Where their mental health isn't considered. Toxic work cultures suppress initiative, risk-taking, and creativity, like I had said. So that's going to affect your organization. So right now I'm talking about how, to all those employers out there, how it's going to impact your organization. And presenteeism, so what I had said about being at work but functioning poorly, it quietly saps output and morale. If people don't want to be at work, if there's that cloud over the workplace, morale is going to be really low and people output's going to be low. The brand and the reputation can be damaged. So word spreads, right? When I first started my business, most of my referrals came from doctors. Makes sense. Psychotherapy. After about I would say 6 months. And at first I was on my own. After 6 months, the word of mouth referrals increased. And now the majority of our referrals are word of mouth, our reputation, right? And so if you look at that, how word spreads, right? Like Glassdoor reviews, social media. Social media is a big thing. I mean, look at cancel culture. You get reviews. If somebody has a bad experience, if there's toxicity, not just people coming to your business, but employees, right? If they leave, people are more apt to start posting about it on social media. And sometimes people just they can't wait to write bad reviews in today's society. And so, there's also insider feedback with that word of mouth for recruitment. So especially like in this area, in a small community, if someone says, oh yeah, I have an interview at so and such place, a lot of times it's like, ooh, I work there, don't go there. If it's a toxic environment, or yeah, that's a really cool place to work. So, and I'm not just talking small communities, anywhere, but you want to keep that in mind. And then organizations known for toxicity, and I think we could all probably name a few that we've heard about, right? But organizations known for toxicity have a really hard time recruiting top talent. They have a hard time recruiting anyone sometimes, that top tier talent, or a diverse talent, attracting diverse talent. So that's going to impact your business outcomes too. And then there's legal and financial risk. I'm going to talk a little bit more, especially with the question that I answer at the end, but just in Canada specifically. And I apologize for those outside of Canada, but this is where I live. And these are the laws that I follow. A hostile and negligent workplace can lead to human rights complaints, can lead to labor law fines, and can lead to lawsuits. And Canada actually has a national standard for psychological safety that all employers it's mandatory. So it's psychological safety in the workplace. And unaddressed psychological issues or psychological hazards violate that standard. That is mandatory for employers. So that can lead to human rights complaints, lawsuits, that sort of thing. So I guess if we need to look at mental well-being in the workplace. A healthy culture isn't just a perk, right? Like having increased mental health supports or employee positive programs isn't just a perk of a business, right? It's a strategic plan. If you are ensuring that your organization promotes workplace well-being, productivity and everything is going to go up, and you're going to avoid lawsuits and bad reputation that is going to hurt your business. Investing in people's well-being builds resilience, loyalty, and high performance. So look at it that way. All right. So there are some well-beings. There are some barriers to well-being that I want to talk about in the workplace, right? So the obstacles that workplaces can find, it's kind of like a slow leak in a tire, right? It's just really subtle at first, and then eventually it grinds momentum to a halt, basically, right? So it starts off very subtle, and then it's like, you're not going anywhere. So right now I want to break down how each of these chips away at not only employee well-being, but also organizational performance. I thought that, doing this podcast, it was really important not just to talk to all the employees out there and say, yeah, these are your rights and this is what it is. And because I think a lot of the employees, they already know all this stuff, right? I think that it's a lot of employers that really need to learn about it too. So when I was focusing on this podcast, I really wanted to address everybody involved in the workplace. Because, honestly, it's the employer that's going to create these programs. I really wanted to touch on that, focus on that too. Poor communication. So the barriers, right? Poor communication. Poor communication can lead to confusion. It can lead to misalignment on goals, on roles, on expectations that people have. If it is not being communicated clearly, people are going to be confused. Like, what's my role? What's his role? What am I supposed to be doing? Poor communication. People don't know what is expected of them. They don't know what the goals might be. That can cause confusion. And then it leads to the other things I talked about: poor performance, lack of creativity, those sorts of things. Poor communication fuels gossip, mistrust, frustration, especially when transparency is lacking. Employees in these types of businesses may feel disconnected or undervalued. That reduces engagement and collaboration. And then this poor communication, the inconsistent messages from leadership can create a culture of uncertainty and fear, right? It's especially if there's more than one leader involved, and one's telling you one thing and the other's telling the other. And those inconsistent messages, it causes fear in people. They don't know what to expect. And when we don't know what to expect, we don't want to underperform, some of us, right? Until we get to that burnout point, then we don't really care if we do. But uncertainty, I mean, anxiety is all about the fear of the unknown and uncertainty. So if you're having mixed messages to your employees, it's going to increase anxiety. And then, not shocking again, we have a barrier: excessive workload. And that's where we get that toxic productivity. The top driver of burnout in Canada, 23.7% of workers cited excessive workload as their main stressor. And it's going to lead to chronic fatigue. It's going to lead to chronic stress. It's going to lead to more errors. It's going to lead to absenteeism, medical leave, mental health leave, physical health leave. If an employee feels like if their workload is so excessive that they're constantly feeling like they're trying to catch up, nobody wants to feel that way. No one wants to feel like we're dropping the ball, like we're behind the eight ball all the time, right? And if that is happening, then morale and creativity are in the toilet. It's going to erode morale and creativity because human beings like to feel like we're accomplishing something. We like to feel like we have a purpose. Dopamine is triggered when we accomplish things. And if we're never accomplishing because we're always trying to catch up, all of those things I mentioned before are going to come up. And over time, this excessive workload is going to cause people to leave. There's going to be a higher turnover rate, and you're going to acquire a reputation as being unsustainable. Right? Don't work there. You never, I just had a client yesterday tell me part of what we had been talking about was the workload that he was dealing with. And he went to his employer a few times and said, like, I have children, a number of children, and I can't get home all the time. And my wife's on her own with the kids and she's pregnant and I'm doing the best I can. And so we were dealing with that, and he was telling his employer, and nothing changed. And he would come home at 1 a.m. and then get a phone call, mid-morning saying, why aren't you at work? And yesterday I saw him again, and he told me that he got a new job. And he said, this client, literally, I said to him, you look lighter. Your whole demeanor is, he actually looked brighter and lighter. And so he said, I actually get to spend time with my kids. And you could see how it crossed over, right? There was more than just him. If they didn't finish a job, it was okay. It was the next day they would finish it. So many different things. Employer was checking in with them. It was like night and day. A lack of recognition. So when employees' effort goes unnoticed, motivation is going to plummet. Again, human beings are creatures of reward. It doesn't mean we want to parade when we finish something, but if we are putting our heart and soul into something, if we value what we're doing, if we are working hard at something and it doesn't even get noticed, we're kind of like, what's the point? Why am I putting all this effort in? Employees who feel unappreciated are twice as likely to quit. And recognition isn't just about praise, right? I just said, the rewards and the praise, but it's not just about praise. It's about feeling like you're being seen and you're being valued. It's not, sometimes it could be, this is praise, but sometimes it could be if I get an email about one of my employees that says, she's a rock star, she really helped my child or myself, or the presentation that they did was fabulous, best one we've had. I forward that email to my employees so that they can see that. I don't just say, oh yeah, I got an email, it was really good. I forward it to them so that they can hear the words of these people that they're helping. They're seen and they're valued. And in that email, and then I often will go and talk to them. It's a small office, but I say, you're a rock star. Well done. Because my name is on the sign, right? And so, but if I didn't have all the people that work here, my business would not be what it is. And I want them to know how much I value and appreciate them. And a culture that celebrates wins, it doesn't have to be a big win. So big wins, small wins, it builds loyalty amongst the staff and psychological safety. And here's one. Micromanagement. I really try in my practice to allow autonomy with my staff. They'll come to me and say, do you want this or do you need this? And I'll often say, do what you think is best. Run it by me, but what do you think is best? I don't micromanage. I know everything that's going on in this office. I know every client. I know every cancel. I know everything that's going on in this office, but I don't have to micromanage my staff because they're professionals. I'm always here if they need help. I know when things go wrong and I'll address it, but I'm not going to tell them, I'm not going to control everything that they do. So micromanagement, I've been in that environment, it's not good for autonomy or growth. And micromanagement creates a climate of distrust where employees feel like their competence is always being questioned. It stifles innovation. Like people are less likely to take initiative. Why would they take initiative when it's just going to be controlled or changed or taken over? And they're not going to want to share ideas, because in an environment of micromanagement, often what's going to happen is you're going to share an idea and it's going to be, yeah, that's okay, but let's try this, right? Or they're going to take your idea and then make it their own or criticize it, break it apart, whatever it happens to be. It can lead to low morale, high stress, and disengagement, especially when someone's autonomy is stripped away for all those reasons that I stated. Also, managers are more likely to burn out. Managers that engage in micromanaging are more likely to burn out because they're trying to control every single detail. And that limits strategic thinking. So if you think about, they're trying to control every detail, and then people are starting to pull away, so they're doing everything, right? That's going to lead to management burnout as well. In today's day and age, these aren't just soft issues. They're barriers. They're not just like, we often talk about, oh yeah, micromanaging and all of these things. No, they are barriers to success. Good news is they're fixable, right? Keep listening. I'm going to give you some ways to fix it, but they are fixable. And with the right leadership and communication and culture, organizations can thrive. And those pain points, if you investigate them, if you change them, can be growth opportunities. So nowadays, especially since the pandemic, we have a lot of remote and hybrid work models, right? They offer flexibility. And that's awesome. If I'm not feeling well, if, I've got a cold or something and I don't want to bring it to everybody in the office, I now have the opportunity to switch my clients to online to do a virtual session. If a client is sick or if they're stuck at work or if they are able to do an online session, it offers a lot of flexibility. Some people love remote work. I know people who work exclusively, remote. The headquarters is in the States or Australia or somewhere else. And they love it. They bring their laptop with them everywhere they go. They do the things they want to do, and the laptop's there, which from a psychological perspective, then you're never really leaving work. But if that works for someone and you don't see they're not experiencing the stress, okay. For others, it's really difficult. And, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic and stuff when people started working from home, and then afterwards when it was going back to the office, a lot of people were resistant because they liked just being at home and, wearing a nice shirt and pajama bottoms and that sort of thing. But it remote and hybrid work can introduce different challenges. And so they can undermine people's well-being, collaboration, feeling heard, feeling like you're part of a team, performance. It's just some of the common issues. So for remote work challenges, isolation and loneliness, you are always working from home. You're not talking to anybody else other than on a screen. At work, sometimes you can go by someone's cubicle or in the staff room or whatever, and you can chat with people. There's a lack of in-person connection. And from other videos, that I've done, that oxytocin is released with human connection. Oxytocin makes us feel good and connected and purposeful. And so that lack of in-person connection or interaction can lead to disconnection and reduced morale because you're just by yourself, right? And sometimes employees feel out of sight, out of mind, especially when the recognition that they're achieving or recognition for anything they do is sparse, right? They feel like I'm just kind of doing my thing. That can also lead to some poor habits, right? Just like work habits. Well, out of sight, out of mind, my boss doesn't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to go golf or, that kind of thing. And then there's communication gaps. So without body language, without hallway chats, you're going to find more misunderstandings happening. For my job, I know there are a lot of therapists out there, psychotherapists or psychologists that work remotely only. I find it difficult because of, what goes into the body language and facial expressions and that sort of thing. I look for people tapping their feet. I look for people wringing their hands. Facial expressions you can see, but if it's a phone call, you can't, obviously. But if I can't see your hands or if you're shaking your leg or anything like that, sometimes that's signs to me that the topic that we're talking about is causing some distress, the wringing of the hands especially. And if I can't see that, that can impede my job. And then I can misunderstand stuff. I might miss stuff, right? But generally speaking, if we're not seeing the body language of other people if everything's via email or stuff like that, tone in email as well, there can often be misunderstandings. Context, like I just said, tone and everything, context can be lost in emails, different threads, Teams chats and stuff like that. The context can be lost in it. And then, as I had just mentioned, the blurred work and life boundaries. During the pandemic, I often worked with a lot of clients on setting up a workspace in another room, not at the kitchen table, in another room. And I'd often talk to them about get up in the morning, get dressed like you're going to work, prepare like you're going to work, and go into that space because it can get really blurred. You don't have that separation between work and home. And then it makes it harder to switch off, but also overwork and burnout are common because expectations aren't clearly defined. If I'm working from home, I might take a little break in the morning, but then I'm working at night when my family's home and that sort of thing. The hybrid work challenges. So hybrids when, you work remotely, but you also go into the office a couple of days a week. Sometimes there's that unequal access and visibility. So in-office employees get more face time with management, and that leads to, or it can lead to perceived favoritism because they're meeting with the employer more often. And sometimes in work, there's spontaneous decisions that are made or this informal networking that happens. And when the employee is working from home, they miss out on those opportunities. There's also coordinating, the complexity of coordinating, scheduling meetings across time zones, locations can be tricky. You can create some collaboration tools. They can help, but they don't replace that ease of in-person brainstorming that can happen. So that can really be a challenge coordinating all of that. Just the cultural fragmentation. So it's a lot harder to build that cohesive culture in a workplace, that team culture, when people are split between being at home and being in the office. And I know when a lot of people, especially in the federal government, came back, they all had days, like they had to split up the week with certain days that they would be in office. So it was guaranteed then that not everybody was going to be in the office at the same time, right? You may have one or two team members in the office at the same time. Some places said Monday, everyone's in, Tuesday, that kind of thing. But as a whole, that can pose difficulty. And then when it's remote or the hybrid back and forth, new hires find it really difficult to fit in, to integrate themselves into feeling part of the team. During the pandemic, my therapist who's been on a couple of podcasts with me, Jade, I hired her in February. The pandemic started in March. She was starting in May. So for the first month and a half or so, I didn't even see her. And we often talk about, how that felt, not being able to talk to each other. We talk to each other, but not being able to sit in the office, just have those bounce off meetings that we have, and just how weird it was for her to start a new job and we're all at home, and just to try to fit in with the team, the cohesiveness of it and how we do things was really isolating. And then there's inconsistent policies and expectations. So without clear guidelines, hybrid setups can feel chaotic. They can feel unfair. And some teams feel pressure to come in more often. So some people feel the pressure to come in more often. Others feel pressure to be more remote. There's that inconsistency. So I think that if we want to look at what helps in this, intentional communication, so regular check-ins, clear documentation of policies and procedures, inclusive meeting practices, making sure that on a meeting day, everyone comes into the office, team building kind of things, or just team meetings. I know some employers do a team meeting once a week, so that once a week everybody's getting together to share ideas and just to meet up and be in person. We also need an equity in access. So to ensure that remote workers have the same opportunities and growth recognition as their in-person colleagues, counterparts. We need to have well-being support. So we need to encourage boundaries. The employer needs to say, you're off the clock at this time, put the computer away, whatever it happens to be. We need to offer mental health resources to people who are working remotely as well. We need to offer it to all our employees, but right now I'm talking about hybrid and remote. And we need to normalize flexibility. And then the culture building. So I said that, meetings once a week, team building. We need to celebrate wins. We need to host, even if it's, if it's a remote thing, host virtual social gatherings. Foster psychological safety across all formats, not just in person. We can do it virtually, but we need to foster that culture, that psychological safety across all formats of work. How do we promote well-being at the office or at a workplace? I think that a lot of people think that well-being is just a buzzword, right? Because everyone's talking about mental well-being, everyone's talking about workplace well-being. I don't think it's a buzzword. I think it's a shared responsibility. I think that both employees and employers or organizations need to share that responsibility of well-being. Do I think that it's the employers, they're the lead in it? Absolutely. You're the one putting in the policies. You're the one with the purse string, holding the purse strings, right? That are going to put in these mental health programs. But employees also have their role in it too. Can't just rely on the employer. And so I'm going to break down ways that the employees can promote their well-being and how employers can also, or organizations can also, like their role, so that you can build healthier and more resilient workplaces. So for employees, take charge of your well-being. It is your well-being. So take charge of your own well-being. Set those boundaries. Define clear work hours. And yes, like I've said before, sometimes you may have to put in some extra hours. Sometimes you may have to come in a little bit earlier or leave a little bit later. That's okay if you're okay with that. I'm talking consistently, right? So define clear work hours. Unplug after hours. There's nothing, you may have an overtime clause in it, but you don't have to keep working after hours. It's not a badge of honor to say, oh, I worked till midnight last night, right? Yes, sometimes employers might. It's their business, but you don't have to do that. You need to protect your personal time. Use scheduling, use calendar blocks, block in some breaks, take your breaks. Ideally, take your breaks away from your desk or you're away from where you're doing your work. But look at your schedule and set those boundaries around breaks and heavy work activities, right? So that deep focus work. Schedule breaks around them. I often say work for a bit, take a 5-minute brain break or 15, but depending, some people get 2 15-minute breaks a day, but break it up. Prioritize mental health. This is your mental health. This is your quality of life. So prioritize it. A lot of employers have the Employee Assistance Program, EAP, and so utilize that if you can. Take a mental health day as part of your sick day or sick leave. Some employers actually incorporate mental health days into sick leave. So you get 3 mental health days a year that you don't, it's not like, oh, I woke up sick, right? It's, I need this day. I need to go sit in the park. I need to go hang out with people. You don't have to tell them what it is, but just giving some examples. Practice mindfulness, being present in the moment, deep breathing, journaling, muscle relaxation, short meditations, grounding activities, all of these different things that we've talked about a lot in our videos and podcasts to manage your stress. Participate in things that you find joy in. Communicate your needs clearly. Speak about any workload concerns that you may have. Speak about any unclear expectations. Ask for that clarity. Clarify them. Because we talked about how, the lack of communication can impact us, our morality, confusion that it causes, not knowing expectations. You also have a role in that. If it's not clear, ask for clarity. If you're having a hard time because your workload is excessive, talk about that. Ask for feedback and support when it's needed. Also be aware, people with social anxiety might ask for feedback, but then get anxious and start like, oh, they think I'm horrible at my job and that sort of thing. So if you're asking for support or if you're asking for feedback, understand that that's feedback, right? Don't only take it as criticism. I think that we often don't ask for the support, we don't speak up, and then the burnout hits us. Don't wait for the burnout to hit. Do it, be proactive in that. Also, stay connected, build relationships with colleagues. A lot of people will say to me, no, that's my job. I don't want to be friends with anybody I work with. That's often a red flag as a therapist for me, because then I start to probe questions. Maybe the job is something that you aren't friends with. And I'm not talking about being friends, like going out with them outside of work. I'm talking about building relationships at work. So you have those outlets at work. It's going to reduce isolation, especially when it's remote work. Having some of those video chats, phone calls, that kind of thing. Join the social events that they have, that your workplace has, even if it's briefly, even if it's virtual, right? Join the virtual or in-person social events. Be more engaged in that. Invest in growth. So seek out opportunities that are going to align with your values, with your interests, with your career goals. Seek out those opportunities and learn from them. Celebrate small wins. Even if your employer is not celebrating those wins, why can't you? Celebrate those small wins, because that's going to boost your motivation and it's going to boost your confidence. So now for all you employers out there, how can you cultivate a culture of mental well-being in your workplace? A culture where people are going to thrive in your workplace. So you need to model healthy behaviors. You need to take breaks and use your vacation time and talk openly about well-being, right? This week has been a very hectic week. I have a lot going on personally too, events that I'm organizing, and we have stuff going on here, and it's just been busy. And yesterday I did, or not yesterday, Wednesday, I did supervision with one of my students, and she was joking, but she kind of made a comment that I said something like, oh, this is what it's like when you own a private practice. Is that something you want to do? And I was joking about that because this isn't what I'm always like. But she was kind of like, yeah, no. And that really, resonated with me, because I don't want to model that, owning a business and stuff is no vacation and I'm just go, go, go. And, yeah, it can be like that, but I also set boundaries and everything. So you really have to, this has been a week, right? So it's been a couple of weeks. You have to model what you want to see your employees do with mental health. I'm not saying model working a whole bunch of hours because you want them to work a whole bunch of hours, right? But you need to take those vacations. You need to talk openly about well-being, and you need to take breaks. You need to normalize flexibility. You need to normalize self-care from your organization, from the top down. You can't just preach to your employees to prioritize their self-care and look at all of that, because in your mind you're thinking, oh yeah, because legally I have to. You need to model it too. You are part of the organization. You also don't want to get burnt out. You want to design work for humans. No toxic productivity. You want to set realistic workloads. You want to set realistic expectations, deadlines. You want to offer autonomy to your employees and trust. You want to avoid micromanaging. You want to recognize and reward. Recognize employees' efforts, reward those efforts. It doesn't have to be financial bonuses, and it can be the recognition that you give them. It can be sending those emails as a reward to them. That's rewarding. Celebrate contributions regularly, like both informal and formally. You can do either or both. You can also tailor your recognition. So there can be public praise. There can also be private praise, where you just kind of sit one-on-one, private notes like the emails, that kind of thing. And you want to foster psychological safety. You want to encourage open dialogue without fear or judgment. It can be really difficult approaching your boss. That can be really difficult. And so you want to ensure that your employee isn't feeling judged, or that there's going to be any retaliation for what they're saying. And you want to train your managers to listen effectively. You want to train them to respond empathetically. And you also, even when you're talking to your managers, you want to do that as well. You want to provide resources and access. So you can offer mental health benefits. You can offer coaching, different wellness programs, and you can ensure that your remote workers have ergonomic setups so that they're comfortable working from home, that they have tech support, that they're not feeling as isolated and alone, and then measure and adapt. So You can use surveys, track well-being in your workplace, and you can act on that feedback. You can just go and do check-ins, performance appraisals where it's a one-on-one meeting and you can talk to each other about. You can involve your employees in shaping the wellness initiatives there. Ask for feedback. Have a social committee, have a wellness committee. They're often the ones that know what works, right? When the employees and the employers work together, you're going to have a wholeness, right? A holistic. You're going to have from both perspectives, and it's going to be a lived experience. It's not only up to either one of those. I want to talk about some of these employee wellness programs. And they're not just nice to have. I had said that it's a strategic plan, but it also promotes healthier, happier environments, which then can increase productivity. So some key benefits: mental health resources. It's kind of a lifeline to resilience. So mental health resources that you provide to your employees can reduce stress and burnout. So there might be, there's these apps. It could be having access to counseling. Like I said, apps like mindfulness apps, EAPs, employee assistance programs. They can help employees manage anxiety and emotional fatigue. Mental health resources can improve focus and morale. So when mental health is supported, employees are going to feel more engaged. They're going to feel more creative and they're going to feel more motivated. And mental health resources can, as I've said before, lower absenteeism. It can reduce the sick days. It can reduce long-term disability, can reduce short-term disability claims. And when we talk about $51 billion per year in Canada, and the number of people who miss work weekly, I think that, that's all. Disability claims are part of that, right? So it can lower that. So that's the mental health resources. Fitness perks, boosting energy, boosting engagement, increased physical health. Some employers have gym memberships. They offer gym memberships or they'll pay for gym memberships. They do step challenges, right, to their employees. They just might have on-site physical health challenges, on-site classes that encourage movement and reduce chronic stress. Some of these too can reduce chronic disease risks as well. It can increase higher energy and productivity by having these fitness perks. Active employees report better sleep. If you are sleeping better, you're going to be more energized and you're going to have higher productivity, more creativity, sharper focus, better concentration, and more stamina throughout the day. And then team bonding, group fitness classes, wellness challenges foster that bonding, that collaboration, camaraderie. And so it's a sense of a shared purpose. And then there's the holistic wellness initiatives. So nutrition support. If you have a cafeteria, if you offer healthy cafeteria options or access to dietitians, wellness workshops that promote healthy eating or better eating habits, that's going to, obviously, that holistic approach, right? The financial wellness, you can have classes on budgeting. You can offer budgeting tools, retirement planning. That's going to reduce money-related stress as well. So even though I'm a mental health worker and I'm talking about a lot of the mental health, it's still workplace well-being. And this is all part of it because money issues are major mental health triggers as well. And then we can talk about preventative care. So, talking to people about the importance of proactive visits with doctors, screening initiatives, that's going to reduce long-term disability or long-term healthcare costs as well. And then the organizational benefits of all of this: improved retention and recruitment. So wellness programs, if people see that you have a wellness program, that's a signal that the company values its people, that it promotes health, and it's going to be easier to attract people and keep top talent if you have that sort of thing. It's going to lower healthcare costs because healthier employees mean fewer claims and reduced insurance premiums for the employer. And it's going to build a stronger culture. So it's going to build a workplace that invests in well-being. It builds trust and loyalty and psychological safety. So when it's done right, wellness programs can be performance multipliers, right? Some companies, in my experience, so a lot of the first responders, agencies or cities, municipalities in Ontario, some policing in different municipalities have made benefits for mental health unlimited, or like $5,000 to $10,000 a year, which I think obviously is fabulous. As I said, some have gym memberships, reimbursements. There's other mental and physical health benefits. Some have mental health days added, and then there's the EAP programs. So right now, I just want to briefly share some of what I do here, right? Ways that I try to incorporate well-being. I'm always learning and adding things, but one thing that I'm really adamant about is that I want my staff to know how much I appreciate them. I tell them all the time, or I try to anyway, and maybe not verbally, but in different ways as well, that, like I said earlier, I would not have a business without them. That might be my name on the sign, right? But they are the ones treating the people. They're the ones bringing people in. The word of mouth is not just about me, it's about them. And so I want them to know how much I appreciate them. So I will do check-ins with them. We had a situation last week where there was a tragedy in our town, and a couple of the therapists had some of the children that were involved, and I was texting them afterwards. I was checking in to make sure that I've got them, they're supported, to see how it went. At times, I'll bring them all out for lunch and I'll give them small gifts. I know that being a mental health professional can be very challenging, and sometimes we might feel, if we have a lot of, complex cases, that we're not making a difference. And so I bought them each a keychain with a starfish on it and a note, a card with the starfish story. And essentially, I'd said it before in another podcast, but essentially the story is a young man trying to save, or an older gentleman thinking that the young man's trying to save all of the starfish when the tide went out. When it was coming back in, he was throwing them in, and he said, "You're not going to save them all." And the young man threw one starfish in, and he said, "I just saved that one." And so I'm trying to tell my staff through these means that I appreciate them, that you're recognized, and that, keep their focus on, we can't save the world, right? We can only save one person at a time, or help. We can't even save, right? But we can help one person at a time, making a difference. We often do 2 get-togethers a year. We have our Christmas party, and then we have our Christmas in July, or this year, August, party. And we combine with my sister's business, which is the other half of Dalgety Wellness. And I've talked about it, Dalgety Resilience. So she's personal training. She does the physical health. I do the mental health. We combine it. And then we combine our staff too, to build morale. We have fun together. We either have things catered, or I like to cook. That's part of my therapy. So I will do some catering, and we have a lot of fun with it. I also will take my staff on a retreat. Last fall, we went to a spa and out for dinner and to hear a band play. And it's just a time for them to be pampered, and for me to treat them to all of this and to say thank you, that you're appreciated. And I encourage my staff to, on long weekends, to take the Friday off too, so that you can have, 4 days off to just do what you need to do and to regroup. And then there's the emails that I talk about, when I get emails and I will forward it to them. There are little things that I will acknowledge. If I see the way they've interacted with the client in the waiting room, if I see the way they've helped a student, if I am very cognizant. It is very important to me to ensure that my employees know that I appreciate them, know that I see it. I think that that's really important. And I had somebody, once, because I'll provide ways that can make their job easier too with some technology and that sort of thing. And I had somebody say to me, why are you spending all this money taking your employees here or getting this or doing this or buying them this? And I remember saying to them, because if you make it your employee feel appreciated and valued and you put the effort into them, I do that because I do appreciate them, but also I said I'm a psychotherapist and I'm a business owner. And if you put the effort into your employees, they're going to put the effort into your business and they're going to do things to reciprocate the feeling that you gave them. And it's a strategic plan, right? For my employees listening to this, I do appreciate you. It's not just a strategic plan, but but it is, right? And they know that because we talk about it, but you need to make your employees feel heard and valued. Okay, so I'm going to get to the question of the week. And this one, like I said, it's a little bit longer. It's one question, but I did a deep dive because I think it's really, really important. For you employers out there who have stayed with me, it's really, really important to listen to this part, okay? Because it is legal. It is a mandatory legal obligation that we have. And I have seen, because I have to write medical notes to be off work or help people get back to work or advocate for people with mental health issues in the workplace, my clients, because I am a business owner, because I have to look into all of this stuff and be aware of all of this, I've learned so much over the last few years with this that maybe if I was only a business owner and didn't have the job, of treating people for this stuff too, I may not have known about, right? Because if it never came up. But the question that I had was, are there respectful ways to talk about mental health without crossing boundaries? So I took this question, then I kind of did the deep dive in the sense that it's about respect, but it's also about the legal parts. So if you are an employer, an HR professional, or an HR professional, most HR professionals are going to know this already, but if you are a leader, an employer, a manager, anybody in a leadership position, the first thing you want to do is normalize the conversation. I am going to read some of these because I did take it off of like the Human Rights Commission and that kind of thing, but you want to normalize the conversation. You want to mention mental health as part of an overall well-being. Just like you would physical health, you don't want to pinpoint certain parts of mental health. You want to avoid assumptions or diagnoses. That's very important. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. You want to focus on the behaviors like the absenteeism, the disengagement, not label, not diagnose your anxiety, your depression. You're not a doctor. And unless they have given you a note with those diagnoses, which they don't have to, by the way, you don't want to label. It's the behavior you focus on. And you want to keep it confidential and empathetic. So I want to make sure that I've supported you, support you in what you need or support your need. And is there anything I can do? Okay. What to avoid? Don't probe too deeply or share stories that take over the conversation. Don't minimize or compare struggles. And I've seen this before. For example, at least it's not as bad as, right? That's dismissive. And don't expect someone to open up just because you are. Consent matters. Just because you open up about stuff doesn't mean that they're going to. They don't have to. Even asking some of these questions can show that you care, that you care enough to create this safe space. And that in itself can make a big difference. In Canada, and this is where I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into this, in Canada, mental health is protected by both the Human Rights Commission, by human rights and labor laws. So that means that employers have a legal obligation to support their employees facing mental health issues or mental health challenges. Okay? So under the human rights protections, and again, listen up. I didn't know this stuff before. Before the last few years. So mental health, so human rights. Mental health is recognized as a disability under the Canadian Human Rights Act and the provincial and territorial human rights codes. Employers must accommodate mental health conditions to the point of undue hardship. So that includes modifying duties, schedules, providing time off if the employee needs it. Discrimination based on mental health is prohibited in hiring, promotion, termination, workplace treatment, and that's like actual, perceived, or past. So I know people are like, well, yeah, Christine, of course. No, right? I have heard so many situations with clients where they say, my boss said to me, there's this promotion, but I don't know if you should apply for it because of your anxiety, or I don't know if you should apply for it, because of, or, well, so-and-so got the promotion because they're at work more often because they don't have mental health issues. I've heard clients have shared those things with me. So even though we think, okay, or you have a history of, it doesn't matter. It is prohibited. You cannot discriminate because of any mental health issues. The duty to accommodate is triggered even if the employee doesn't specifically or explicitly request it. So if the employer is aware of any issues, they have to act on it. They have a duty to accommodate, even if the employee hasn't explicitly requested it. So that's the human rights protection. The labor laws and occupational health and safety. So under the Canada Labor Code and the provincial equivalents, employers must ensure a psychologically safe workplace. That's legal. Employers are required to identify and mitigate psychological hazards just like they have to for physical ones. If a toxic work environment contributes to mental illness, employers may be liable for constructive dismissal or damages, so lawsuits. Workplace investigations are mandatory if there's any harassment, discrimination, or violence, or if it's suspected. So even if the complaint is an informal complaint, if an employer has any awareness or has heard harassment, discrimination, any kind of violence, you have to do an investigation. Even if the employee says, no, it's okay, I don't want to, it's mandatory, you have to. And then here's a big one that I hear all the time. And so when I saw it, I was like, ooh, I want to share that. Okay, so what can employers ask? Right? I remember, not to go into too much detail, but my daughter-in-law works in human resources, and she and my son lived with me for a little bit while they were building their house. And one of my employees was pregnant, and she texted me and said at night and said, I may not be in tomorrow. I'm in a merge. I was having some contractions, and no, she said, I'm in a merge. And I said, whoa, are you okay? What's going on? And then I said, you might not be into work. You're not coming in tomorrow. Don't worry about it. And my daughter-in-law right away said, actually, you're not allowed to ask her what's going on. Right? Now, this is a small workplace. It's a different type of relationship. I knew that she would be okay with me asking that, but I didn't realize I couldn't ask her what was going on. And right away, she gave me all the details. And she did end up having her baby very early that night, but I didn't know that I couldn't say what was going on. So if accommodation is needed, so this is what employers can ask, what they're allowed to ask. If accommodation is needed, is there anything we can do to support you in your role? So an employer can ask if an employee requires accommodation to perform their job duties. About functional limitations, not diagnoses. So are there any tasks or aspects of your job that are difficult for you right now? They can ask about how a condition affects work, but not what the condition is, right? You don't have to tell them what your diagnosis or your condition is. For medical documentation with limits. So an employer can ask you for medical documentation. They may request a doctor's note outlining, functional limitations, expected duration of the limitations, recommended accommodations, but they cannot demand a diagnosis or a detailed medical history. And they can ask for clarification during accommodation process. So if the information provided is vague, an employer can ask for clarification to ensure appropriate accommodations or appropriate support is offered. Okay? What employers cannot ask? What's your diagnosis? Or what medications are you on? That's private medical information and not required for accommodation. So you cannot ask your employee basically what is causing them to be off or why they need these accommodations, diagnosis, medications, none of that. You cannot ask, are you mentally ill? Or are you experiencing mental illness? Or do you have depression? These are discriminatory and violate privacy rights. You cannot ask, why didn't you tell us sooner? That's something I hear from clients. Employers are not obligated to disclose unless they need accommodation. And so sometimes they're just kind of suffering in silence or they're experiencing it in private. They don't have to tell you what's going on in their life. They don't have to tell you what's going on with their mental health. And then sometimes it gets to a point where now they need accommodation. And so when you say, why didn't you tell us sooner? They don't have to. And any questions that would be seen as coercive, stigmatizing, or retaliatory. So employers cannot ask any questions that may seem that way. So the different legal foundations, the Canadian Human Rights Act and provincial codes protect mental health as a disability. Employers have a duty to accommodate to the point of undue hardship. The duty to inquire applies if an employer notices performance issues that may be linked to mental health. That's a duty to inquire, right? So you have to, if you notice any behaviors, you have to inquire, not specifics, but how you can help. So even if the employee hasn't disclosed anything, you have a duty, it's mandatory that you investigate and you look into it to help them out. And under the occupational health and safety laws, employers must provide a psychologically safe workplace. Okay. Workplace well-being. A lot of information there. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you learned from some of this, especially some employers out there. Let's make our workplaces more conducive to mental health and physical and mental well-being. Put some strategies in place. They don't have to be grandiose things. They can be anything that's going to help your client, help your employees feel valued, appreciated, motivated, heard, seen, making that workplace that we spend so much time at feel psychologically safe to be at. For people listening to this that aren't employees, think about what we've talked about and maybe come up with ways that you can also work on your mental well-being at work, ensuring those workplace boundaries, those workload boundaries, that work-life balance. Okay, going to wrap up. You can help us out by subscribing to our YouTube channel, by following us on Spotify, The Mental Playbook with Christine Dalgety. YouTube is Dalgety Counseling and Psychotherapy. And we have many shorts, many videos on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, just outlining ways that tips and tricks for mental health. And you can follow us, like us, comment, share on all of those platforms as well. All right. See you next time and take care of you.